to appreciate the role that Higgs is going to play, we have to really understand, at least at some level, the idea of what is called the quantum field theory. This is the language in which we describe the interaction between the particles. This is the language in which the Standard Model is formed. It is a language which describes creation and annihilation of particles. So for example, when I look at light, the light that is emitted from my face in a certain sense is the light is created by a molecule on my which is on my skin of my face, and that light gets absorbed in your retina of your eye, and so a photon was created here and a photon was absorbed in your retina. So we need a language in which the particles can be created and destroyed. Since these particles can be created or annihilated anywhere in the space, anywhere in this room for example, we associate with every point in this room or every point in the universe really a set of numbers, and these numbers can change with time. So these numbers tell us that which particle can be created, how many particles can I create at this point, and which particle is destroyed at some other point. So at each point in the space I have some numbers, and these numbers change with time. This set of all possible numbers is what we call field. So field is something which I attribute to every point in the universe. So everywhere in the universe there is an electromagnetic field. The simplest question that we can ask about this theory is that how many numbers should I associate at each point in space and time to describe a particle of light? Now our first instinct would be that since there are two types of particle of light which I described, one spinning counterclockwise and one spinning clockwise, our instinct would be that at every point in space there should be two numbers which should tell us how to create or destroy a particle either of a left-handed rotation or a right-handed rotation. But the way we want to describe our laws of nature, we want to put a very important requirement on them. The requirement is that the law of nature, as we describe, should not depend upon how I am moving. So if I describe the laws of electromagnetism sitting here, they should look the same if I try and describe the laws of electromagnetic force if I'm moving at a constant speed. And this is of course the principle of relativity. Now this requirement forces upon us that you need not just two numbers, you need two more numbers. So because of the requirement that the laws of nature should be same everywhere, at every point in space I need four numbers to describe creation or annihilation of a photon. These four numbers together form at every point in the space, and these numbers can change with time, I have a field which is called the electromagnetic field. Now remember, originally I had really two particles, but the number of fields I have introduced is four, right? Because at every point in space and time I have four numbers. So I have a redundancy. This redundancy in our description is what you call the symmetry. What is a symmetry? The symmetry in physics and mathematics means that you take some object or equation or a law and do something to it, and after you've done something, it still looks the same. So now in case of electromagnetism, because of these four numbers and the redundancy, there is what we call a local symmetry. Why is it a local symmetry? Because I can go on changing the number. I can change these four numbers to a different four numbers here. I can change four numbers to some different four numbers here. And I can change them by different amount at different times also. So the fact that I can do something to my theory by different amount at different places at different time and still the theory looks the same is equivalent of saying that the theory has a local symmetry. Now one of the consequences, as we saw, that we started this whole story by saying that the particle of light was massless and there are two types of particles, and then we were forced by the requirement that the description should be same for everyone, that we had to add redundancy. So we can encapsulate this idea in a form of a theorem which says that any quantum field theory which is a local symmetry will describe a particle like a photon which is a massless particle. Now this idea that you have a theory in which there is a local symmetry was very attractive to a lot of physicists. The idea of symmetry has always been an important guideline in discovering new. It's important to all of us from an aesthetic point of view, but in physics, it has been very important in discovering new laws. In 1950s, many people, particularly C and Yang, proposed that this idea of local symmetry can be extended. What Yang and Mills and others could do by using this idea was to create a theory which looked very much like electromagnetic theory, but with one important difference. What they found that they could write a theory in which there was not one particle, which is the particle of light we had originally in electromagnetic theory, but there were four particles. All these four particles, of course, were massless particles. What they found, which was very interesting, that one of the particles was just like the particle of light. The remaining three particles were precisely the three particles that were required to describe the weak interaction. Now if I go back to my previous slides, notice in the top three diagrams, I've drawn a diagram in which a particle called neutrino comes and interacts with a particle electron, which is on the right hand side. Notice there are three kind of particles here. First, on the first diagram I have Z0, in the second I have W plus, and on the third W minus. Here was the beginning of the idea of unifying two very different kind of forces, the electromagnetic force and a weak force. So what people realized, that if I write a theory in which there is a local symmetry, in such a theory with a local symmetry, I'll be led to four massless particles. Three of them could be responsible for mediating weak interaction. One is the particle responsible for mediating electromagnetic interaction. So in one theory, I have a description both of electromagnetism and weak interaction. But as you would probably recall, the three particles which I get, all the four particles here I get are massless. But for weak interaction, I need particles which are massive. So that's where the Higgs is going to play a role. The reason the Higgs is going to play a very important role is that if I have a particle which is massless, then such a particle would mediate a force which is a long range force. And this idea actually is a very old idea, and it comes from a Faraday, who pointed out that if I have any particle which carries some charge, then it is a source of a line. And these field lines will go on forever and ever, and only way I can destroy these field lines is by they terminate on some other charged particle. So if I take an isolated charged particle, the line of forces will go on forever and ever. The density of course will decrease, but lines can never be destroyed. They can only terminate on some other charged particle. As a result, the force between two charged particles, the two electric forces, can never become zero. It can become smaller and smaller, but it never becomes zero. Because of the local symmetry, we realized that we could have four particles. One is massless, which is nice because that is what light is. And three were there which behaved like the three particles which are responsible for weak interaction, but with one glaring problem, that they were massless. But if they were massless, that would mean that the weak interaction should also be long range. There's another problem which I had mentioned in the beginning, that the weak interaction has this very crucial property that the mirror world is not a possible one, in the sense that the weak interaction makes a distinction between the left hand and the right hand. It was realized by many people, right from starting from Dirac, that if the electron was massless, if the electron didn't have any mass, then electron would also come in two varieties, just as the light came in two varieties. Again, the idea is that electron spins, and it could spin along the direction of its motion, or it could spin in a direction opposite to the motion. This idea that an electron can be of two types is true only if the electron is massless. And that is rather easy to understand. Imagine there's a particle which is rotating in a direction in which it is moving. So when I say it's rotating in a given direction, I use this idea that if it is rotating in a counterclockwise, I call it that the direction of rotation is my thumb. So like in the top diagram, the particle is rotating in the direction in which it is moving. If the electron is massive, so you could move at a speed which is larger than the speed of the electron. So for you, the electron is moving backwards. So in that case, what was right-handed for me would become a left-handed electron for you. So the distinction between the right-handed electron and the left-handed electron is not possible if the electron is a massive. The only way we could make this distinction was that if the electron was a massless particle. If a particle is a massless, then it moves at the speed of light, and the speed of light is same for everyone. So in the mathematical description of weak interaction, what was postulated, and this was done by many people, including E.C.G. Sudarshan, Masek, Feynman, Gell-Mann, etc., many other people, they said that really the electron should be treated as a massless particle, which is something totally doesn't make sense to us, but we'll come to that. And if it is massless, then it comes in two varieties, one spinning along the direction of motion and one spinning opposite to. And then they said that the one which is spinning opposite, which is the one which I call left-handed electron, is the only one which carries a charge for the weak interaction. Just like the electric charge is responsible for electromagnetic interaction, there is a charge which is responsible for the weak interaction. Because the weak interaction makes a distinction between the left and right, we had to give a different amount of charge to the electron which is spinning along counterclockwise and an electron which is spinning clockwise. But the distinction between the left-handed electron and a right-handed electron makes sense only if the electron is a massless particle. Then it travels at the speed of light. Then if it is left-handed for me, it will be left-handed for everyone. If it is right-handed for me, it will be right-handed for everyone. If it is massive, then if it is left-handed for me, it can become right-handed for me. So that's why we are forced to a theory in which the electron should be massless. And similarly for any other particle which experiences a weak interaction, like quarks. So all the building blocks, according to this way of looking, electrons and quarks should be massless. They should not have any mass. Now these two problems were eventually solved around late 60s, early 70s. particularly by Steven Weinberg and Abdus Salam. So what Weinberg and Salam said, that yes, we can use the idea of local symmetry, and there will indeed be 4 particles, but there is one important addition we have to make in our theory. So they said that there is another field required, and that's what we call the Higgs field. Now this Higgs field has 2 very important properties. It is a field which carries a charge. So that is, the Higgs field itself has a weak charge, no electric charge, but it has a weak charge. And the second property, which is very, very non-intuitive, it is the property that if you want to create a situation in which the universe has its lowest energy, then the Higgs field should be non-zero. Now just to understand why it is rather strange, imagine that take this room and I want to create a situation in this room so the energy of this room is as small as possible. So what will I do? Remember, mass and energy are same for us because of the Einstein's famous relation E is equal to mass into square of c square. So what I have to do, I would like to remove all the molecules of air from this. So I will have a vacuum. But light also carries energy, so I'll remove all possible electromagnetic field. So in such a room, I would be in a state of lowest energy because I removed the electromagnetic field, I removed every particle from the room, and this is a state of lowest. But the Higgs field has a very curious property. Now if I take a room in which there is a Higgs field, and if I remove the Higgs field and make it zero, my energy doesn't become less, it becomes more. So what this diagram shows is a graph in which what I've shown is that if you look at any point in the space, and if the Higgs field has some value, and look at that blue ball shows there are 2 blue balls reflecting 2 possible scenarios. One scenario, when the blue ball is at the top of this Mexican hat, is the situation when there is no Higgs field, right? So this is at the origin of at the bottom I'm drawing the value of the field. This blue ball here is at a point when there is no Higgs field. But when there is no Higgs field, the energy is huge. So it is a curious field. When there is no field, there is a large energy. Now if I want to create a situation when the energy is lowest, what do? I must have a Higgs field somewhere here. That means when the field has some value, the energy is less. Now what Weinberg and Salam said, that if we have such a field, that there is a field which is everywhere there in the universe, has 2 important properties. So the universe is immersed in this field. Every point in the universe there is a Higgs field. It has same value everywhere. And if I didn't have this Higgs field, the energy of the universe would be much, much larger. So if the universe wants to be in a state of smallest possible energy, it should be filled with a Higgs field. So we have this field which carries an indefinite amount of weak charge, which is present everywhere, and which is the state in which the universe would like to be. So now we have introduced this very curious field. So what does it do for it? Well, it solves the 2 important problems, and this was what was pointed out by Higgs and Englert. First, they said that if the universe is filled with a Higgs field and it carries a weak charge, then even if the particles of weak interaction which are massless, remember there are 3 particles of weak interaction, Z0, W plus and W minus, which in our theory had no mass, right, will appear to us as a massive particle. And the reason is rather easy to understand, because remember the reason whether the force is a long range or short range depends on the mass of the particle that communicates that force. Now we started with a theory in which the particles were massless, and we said that such a theory should be long range because I had shown you this diagram of Faraday. Imagine this is some particle which carries a weak charge. It will emit the equivalent of the field lines of the weak lines, like the analog of electric fields for the weak force. And these field lines will go on and on forever and ever till they terminate on some other charged particle. And that's why in this scenario the weak force would be a long range force. But that we know is not true, because weak interaction is only operates at a very short distance. Now if I take the same charged particle but I put it in a medium in our universe which is filled with the Higgs field, then what will happen? This is what this diagram shows. Now what has happened? I put the same charged particle, but it is filled, it's in a field, it's in a universe in which is filled everywhere with the Higgs field. Remember, the Higgs field carry charge, and the field of line of forces can terminate on charge only. They cannot end arbitrarily. They have to end on some charge. But the vacuum, the state of lowest energy itself carries a charge, right? What we see in this diagram is the lines of forces are going. They would like to go forever and ever, but soon they encounter this Higgs field, and the Higgs field carries a charge, so the lines can terminate. As a result, if I take 2 such charged particles, they won't know about each other because the force lines from each one of them is terminating. But if I bring a particle very close to it, then they would be able to experience the line of this particle. So if I bring another particle which carries a weak charge very close to this, then it will be able to experience the field lines, and that's why there is a short range. But if the particle is somewhere away, it won't be aware of this particle because the field lines have not reached, they have been terminated by the charge in the Higgs field. And that's how they realize that even though your theory has a particle which is massless, W0, Z0 and W plus and W minus, but because of the Higgs field, effectively it becomes massive. The force that it mediates becomes a short range force.